Starting right away. Let's get started because I got to leave a little early today. We're on 4B1, 4B1, Dalet Amud Beis, the right column in the art scroll, Tanu Rabban and Tome Potam in our Yiriya. All right. I think you're the only person. On right now, Jerry. So we'll just get started. Here we go. Tanu Rabbanon. Tame potem mina urea. A tame, an import, a person that's tame is potem from coming and seeing and bringing the oilas ria. Diksev ubaasa shama v'avesim shama. You shall come there and you shall bring. Kol sheyeshna b'bia yeshna b'ava. Anyone who's in the category of coming is in the category of bringing. Anybody who's not in the category of showing up cannot bring. Since a Tame person is not allowed into the Azara, is not allowed into the courtyard, he therefore, of course, cannot bring his Oilis Riyah. So therefore, no problem. A blind person in one eye, Patam in Ariyah, is also Patam from coming up, appearing in the Beis Hamikdash. Shenema Yiro says like this. Shenema Yiroe Yeroe. For it says like this, Yeroe Yeroe. That means that you should see Hashem, but in all should be seen Hashem. But derech shabole, right? The reason that it says it twice is to teach us that the manner that Hashem comes as it was to see us, the Oila Regalim, which means in a completed form. So he comes to the Beis Hamikdash to be seen by the people with the completed form. We're now on 4B2. Just like Hashem shows up, as it were, with two eyes, meaning complete. So too he must be seen with two eyes, with a complete seeing. Therefore, somebody who has got a blemish of only one eye is potter from Oila Regalim and Oilas Riyah. Now, from here on, we're going to have a Gadata for most of the rest of today, and we're going to move along very, very quickly. Here we go. 4B2. Here we go. Rabbi Huna Kimatalai Kra Yera Yera. Rabbi Huna came to this pasuk that where it's written twice, right? Where it's written Yera. And we read it, Yeroy, what do you call it? Bechi cry. Omar, he said, a servant who is so beloved that his master looks forward for him to show up. Yisraket, Mimene should suddenly distance himself from the servant. Tiksiv, because it says where Hashem seems to be rejecting the Oila Regel, where its pasuk says, "Ki savoyu lirois panai." When you came to appear before me, mi bike sois, who sought this from you, miyedcha, from your hand, remois chatserov, that you be trampling my courtyards, which is mashma that I don't want you in my house trampling all over the place. Rav Huna kimotelai cry. When Rav Huna got to this pasuk, he would cry. You shall slaughter shalomim and eat it there. A servant who's so beloved by his master that is adai, longs for the evet to eat at his table. Yisrachek mimenu, now all of a sudden distance himself from the servant. Why do I need your numerous sacrifices, said Hashem? This is in the first parak of Yeshaya, where the Amish was saying, behave yourself. I don't need your kabbanas as much as I need you to behave yourself. Rabbi Elazar came to this pasuk, Bechi, he cried, Yosef's brothers, when he said, Ani Yosef, Yosef, is my father still alive? The pasuk says, but his brothers could not answer him, for they were astounded before him. Now, so much that the rebuke of the flesh and blood caused so much consternation, then the rebuke of the Holy One will certainly cause so much dismay. Because when Yosef said, Ani Yosef, and the next words were, Ha'oid avi chai, he was telling his brothers, you guys were so concerned about Yaakov and that he would remain alive, and that's why you had to go back to him. You didn't worry about that when you sold me. Rabbi Elazar Kimot Lahai Kra Bechi, he cried. Shmuel Bayayim Shmuel El Shol Lomo his Gastani Lalas. I said, why did you disturb me to raise me up? This is an interesting story. Shmuel had already passed away. Shaul was going to war with the Pelishtim. Ultimately, he would be killed here. And he asked the Urim V'Tumim if the Chayshin Urim V'Tumim, if he'd be successful, was not answered. Then illegally he went to the Ivy Tiny diviners, Avodah diviners, to try to get divined what would happen. They didn't answer him. So finally he went, and somehow he went to the few remaining necromancers, for lack of a better word, those who knew how to raise the dead, and he went to them, and somehow they raised the soul of Shmuel Hanavi. And so he's asking Shmuel to ask Shmuel if should he go to war or not, which of course was shtickle illegal, but neither here nor there. Anyway, so Shmuel said to Shaul, why did you disturb me from my ultimate rest to raise me up? Now, if the righteous Shmuel was fearful of divine judgment, then we should definitely be fearful of divine judgment. Shmuel Mahi, where do you see from this pasuk where Shmuel says, why did you disturb me to raise me up, that he was worried about divine judgment? Tiksiv, because it says, Vatoima Isha El Shol, and the woman said to Shol, the necromancer, Elohim Ra'isi Olim, I saw a great man ascending from the earth. Oilim means trey mashma, two. Chad was Shmuel, but Idach, and the other one was Moshe Rabbeinu. The Ozam Shmuel v'asil Moshe b'adei, because after Shmuel was summoned by the necromancer, Shmuel went and brought Moshe Rabbeinu with him. Amalei, Shmuel said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Dilma chas v'sholem ladina mispahani. Maybe, heaven forbid, God forbid, I was being summoned to judgment. And so I want you there, Moshe. What do you call it? Because you're going to be the best advocate for me. Kumba hade, stand by me. The lepka milsa, the chsafta b'yaraiso, the law kiyamtiyah. 4b3. For there's no halacha that was written in the Torah that I have not fulfilled. Rabbi Ami kimoti lahai kra. When Rabbi Ami got to this pasuk, Bechi, he cried, and he said, the pasuk says, Yitem ba'ofa piu ula yesh tikva. Let him put his mouth to the dust. Perhaps there is hope. Ulai, perhaps yesh tikva. Amar Rabbi Ami would say, Kula hai, all this suffering that his face is rubbed into the dust. V'ulai, and it's only perhaps there will be hope. Rabbi Kimoti Lahai Kra, Bechi would cry, Big Bakshu Tzedek Bakshu Anovo, Ulai, maybe Tisaru B'Yoim Hashem. Seek righteousness, seek humility, perhaps you will be concealed on the day of Hashem's wrath, anger. Oma, Kula Hai, you're going to do all of that, righteousness, humility, Ulai, and only perhaps. Rabasi Kimotilai Kra, Bechi would cry, but the pasuk is Sinura, the Hebu Toy, the Tzigu Bishar Mishpat, Ula Yechir Hashem, and the Kates of us. Despise evil and love good, and establish justice by the gate. Ulai, perhaps Hashem, the God of hosts, will grant favor to the remnants of Yosef. Kula hai v'ulai, and Ravasi would say, all that, or you do all of that, and only perhaps you'll be saved. Again, this is all very esoteric. But again, it's when terrible things happen in the world, i.e., the Holocaust. Once it's unleashed onto the earth, everybody gets caught in the web. Okay. Any questions, Jerry, or we're good to go? Okay, I'm assuming we're good to go. Rabbi Yosef kimoti lahai kra. When Rabbi Yosef came to the following pasuk, Vechi would cry. The pasuk says, "V'yesh nispe beloy mishpat." There is one who succumbs without justification. In other words, there are people that die even though they were so holy they shouldn't have died, but they have to die because of what was decreed by other Marisha. But otherwise, there's no reason for them to be passing. Omar, he would say, okay, me ikid the are there those who depart this world not at their allotted time? Yes. Kihad Rabibi Barabaya, like in the case of Rabibi, the son of Abaya, Shchir Kabei Malach HaMoves, whom the angel of death frequently visited. In one case, the Malach HaMoves, the angel of death, said to his agent, apparently the Malach HaMoves has agents, Zil Aisili Miriam Megadlus Naisha. Go bring me Miriam, the brainer of women's hair. The beauty parlor, Miriam from the beauty parlor. Ozil Islay Miriam Megadlus the Darke. Instead, he brought Miriam, who was the caretaker, the Mora of young children. Amalei, so the Malach HaMoves says to the Shliach, you made a mistake. Ana Miriam Megadlus Seyev and Nashaya Amelo. I told you to bring Miriam the beauty parlor. Why did you bring me the wrong Miriam? Amalei, so the we're holding 4B3 on the bottom. We're in the Haggadah. Dalit Amid Beis, almost on the bottom. We're up to the Miriams, where he made a mistake and he took the shliach of the Malach HaMoves took the wrong Miriam. Amalei, ki hachi ahadra. So if so, I will be Mechai Basin. I will bring I will return this Miriam, the beauty parlor Miriam, back to life, and I'll take the other Miriam. Amalei, said the Malach HaMoves, Choyul v'atisa, meheve l'minyana. Since you've already brought her, let her be numbered among the dead. Says the Gemara, how was he able to take her? It wasn't her time. Because she was holding a poker in her hand, not because Shigra, and she was extending it into the oven. We're now on Hey Amid Aleph, 5A1. We're on Hey Amid Aleph. Umechaya Sanura, and was sweeping out the oven. Shaklov Anchatot Agabo Decharo. As she was moving it, she accidentally rested it on top of her foot and damaged herself. Kadcha, she burned herself. The Isra Mazel, and the Mazel therefore was changed, was impaired. Va'itisa, and at that moment I was able to grab her. Okay? Amalei Rabibi Barabai. So Rabibi Barabai said to the Malach HaMoves, do you have permission to act in this way? The Rebbeinu Shalom gives you permission for this. Amalei v'loy ksiv yesh nispeh v'loy mishpat. So the Malach HaMoves is a lamdan. He brought the prosik. Is there one who succumbs without just justification? Amalei, we said ksiv dar haylech v'dar ba. There's another generation comes and a generation goes, meaning a generation goes and a generation comes, meaning each generation must complete its allotted time. Amar, he said, I take these souls along with me until they've completed the generation. That means they hang out with me before ascending. Until, and then I hand them off to Duma, who's the Malach in charge of the souls when they come up. Amalei, he said, what do you do with this person's unfinished years? Amar, says the Malach HaMoves, If there's a young Talmud Chacham who's got a forgiving nature, who's easily forgives and it's not a captain, my sipin lay, I add the years to him, and he's the deceased, he replacement. And what happens is the mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim that he does in those extra years will be a zechus for the neshama that was taken earlier. Rabbi Yochanan kimati lahai kra bechi. When he got to this pasuk, he would cry and he said, "V'tisiseni boy levaloi chinam." You have incited me against him to destroy him for no reason. This is an iyod that the Satan had. He was saying that Hashem was saying that the Satan had incited me against iyod. Right? Because in other words, to test him to see if his emunah and betachim would remain even when things were not going so good. Okay, so he said like this. Eved Sharabi Messina Loiben Nisas, an Eved whose master, when they incite him, is incited and acts against the slave. Takana Yeshloi, is there any remedy for him? Rabbi Yochanan, Kivimati Lahai Bechi, also an Iyoi. Hein B'Kedoishav Lo Yamin, he cannot have faith even in his holy ones. Ibi Kedoishav Lo Yamin, Kemad Yamin, if he has no faith in those who are holy, then who could Hashem have faith in? Yomi Echad, Rabbi Yochanan was going on a trip. He saw a person, the Havinotki Tanoi, was gathering fish. Shavik Hanok the Matu, the Shavik Hanok the Matu. He left those that were ripe and only took those that were not ripe. Why aren't you taking the ripe ones? They're better. I need these figs for provisions during my trip. These, the ones that are not yet ripe, will keep for the journey. The ones that are already ripe will spoil along the journey. When he heard this, even though I cannot have faith, even in the holy ones. In other words, there are young people that are perfectly righteous that are sometimes taken away from this world before they succumb to Averis. Because I gotta be because they're too quick to get rotten. Chanoich, exactly like Chanoich in Parshas Bereshis, ve'einenu. He was there and then he wasn't. Because the world was starting to deem Avodah Zarah, and Chanoich was holding on. Eini, is this not so? He Talmud the Habi Bishavuvus Sheva Vusay the Rebbe Alexandri. He was a Talmud Chacham, a young Talmud Chacham who lived in the neighborhood of Rebbe Alexandri. He was shocked Ad Zutra, who passed away while still young. But Omar and Alexandri said, if this young Talmud Chacham wanted to live in a more righteous path, he would have lived. But if Rabbi Yochanan's the thing was correct, Taich of the pasuk correct, maybe he was taken away because he was so righteous and HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want him to fall. Says Gemara, this was one who rebelled against his teachers. What was the rebellion? That he didn't stand up for them. That he didn't stand up for them when they came into the base side, when they came into the shul. Very good. So now further, 582. Rabbi Yochanan kimati lahai kra bechi. When Rabbi Yochanan came to this pasuk, he would cry. V'karafti aleichem lamishkut v'yisi ad mahara b'mechashvim u'menoafim u'menishboyim l'shokim v'oiskei sochim. And I will draw near to you for the judgment. And I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, against the adulterers, against those who swear falsely. All three of these are chayiv misa. And now look at the fourth one. And against those who exhort the wage of the worker, which is not a chayiv misa. Eved sharabu bikroiveli duinoi. A slave whose master draws him near to judge him and swiftly testifies against him. Takana yeshloi. Does he have any remedy? And this is the case. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Oy lonu sheshokal aleinu akosu kalois kichamuris. Woe unto us that this Torah weighs against us the light offenses as equal with the stringent offenses. Because you have in there the offenses that are chayiv nisel, and you add offenses mentioned in the day that are merely a chayiv lav.
Actually, withholding the wages of a poor worker who relies on his paycheck is in a way a form of retzicha, of murder.
But so in punishment, right? I'm just saying in punishment it doesn't rise to the level of a chayiv misa. It's not a chayiv misa. That's what it says. But you're exactly right. If you wanted to look at this, in fact, it could be argued that that's the worst. So holding back the wages of the worker is probably worse than the others, because ultimately the other ones are between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Right.
And that you can always do tshuva. To do it against the worker is against HaKadosh Baruch Hu and against man. It's both ben Adam l'chaverei and ben Adam l'mokim.
Right.
Your kippur is mechaper on the others. It's not mechaper on this until you ask them forgiveness. Right. So in reality, it is tougher, of course. The member here is only on the punishment.
Right.
But the punishment is in this. Okay. Amarei Shlokish, Kol Hamate Dinoi Shel Ger. Anybody who perverts the judgment of a ger, Ki'ilu Mate Dinoi Shel Mala, it's like he's perverting the judgment of the one above. Shenema Umate Ger, and change the word Umati Ksiv. The written, it's one who has perverted me in acting poorly against the ger. The art scroll is busy. The truth of the matter is, you're not allowed to pervert anybody. You're not allowed to pervert anyone's judgment. So why dafka again? Okay? Because wronging any person, the Torah Yavin says, is considered perverting the judgment of God in the sense that Hashem is now bothered to have the money returned to the rightful owner. But wronging again is deemed a greater evil. Who commits it is as if he's presiding over a case where Hashem is the defendant. Because a ger has no family, has no baggage. Ger sheniskai kikotin shenoiladam. A ger that becomes a ger is like he's newly born. And all his old connections are over and done with. He's like newly born. He's the start of a new family.
Right.
And that makes him much more vulnerable. And that is why, while we know that the Klal Gadol b'Torah is v'ahavta l'reyacha kamoicha, you shall love your friend like yourself, it only says that line once in the Torah. V'ahavta es hager, you shall love the stranger, says it at least 36 times in the Torah. Right. Rabbi Elazar, I think, says it 48 times. He has even a greater number. But the reality is, one can argue that, in fact, v'ahavta es hager, to love the ger, to love the prostitute, the stranger, could very well be the Klal Gadol b'Torah. Because v'ahavta l'reyacha kamoicha, you should love your friend like yourself, meaning v'ahavta es hager, so that he should become your friend. And you should love him. You should love him like you love yourself. Right. So that's what it's coming to tell us. Because we were strangers in a strange land. In Mitzrayim, Kigayim or Yisi Beretz Mitzrayim. And the truth is, to this day, we may live in America, but we are known as Jewish Americans. Right? We're known by our religion. We know that we don't quite fit. We are strangers even in this, because this is not our own land. We were born in this land, but it's not our land.
Right.
Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, Kol ha'osid davo u'nescharik by, one does something and immediately regrets his action. Moichin loy miyad, he's forgiven immediately. Shenema lo yireuni, where it says, and they do not fear me. Ha yireuni, if they do fear me, moichin loy miyad, they forgive immediately. I heard a beautiful vart from the Vilna Gaon. The din is that if one does a mitzvah and then he regrets doing the mitzvah, the din is the mitzvah falls away. That's the halacha. If you do a mitzvah and you regret doing the mitzvah you get the mitzvah falls away. So says the Vilna Gaon, it should work that way for averos. If you do an avera and you regret doing the avera should fall away. Says the Vilna Gaon, it does. It does. But there's one difference. When you do a mitzvah and you regret it, it maybe falls away, but the white spot on your soul still remains. When you do an avera and you regret it, the avera falls away. In other words, Yotzabai Ruach Shtus,
The shirt still needs to go to the washing machine.
It still needs, that's exactly what the Vilna Gaon says. The Vilna Gaon says, you have charata, you realize a Ruach Shtus entered your head. You didn't mean to be married to Malchus. You didn't mean to rebel against Hashem. But the black spot is still there. You got to go into the washing machine. So that's what's going on over here. Says the Gemara Vayter. Rabbi Yochanan came up to Lahai Kro Bechi. When Rabbi Yochanan came to this place, he would cry. He has Kol Hashem Maaseh Elokim Yovei B'Mishpat Al Kol Nela. For every action which a man does, Hashem will bring him into judgment, even concerning hidden matters. Of Evet Sharabi Shokeloi Shkaga is his kindness. A slave whose master weighs his unintentional mistakes with his intentional mistakes. Takana Yesh Lai, does he have any remedy? Says the Gemara, my Konela, what is this hidden matter? This refers to one who kills a louse in the presence of his friend, and the friend is disgusted by it. This is somebody who spits in the presence of his, he has phlegm and he has saliva and he spits it out in the presence of his friend, and his friend is disgusted by this. My Toivim, bro, the end of that pasuk says, whether for good or for bad. Amir debate of Yanais, what could be for good? How could you be punished for doing something good? This is one who gives charity to a poor person in public. Who saw a person giving a zuz to a poor person in public. Better that you had not given him the charity. But now that you have done it, you have embarrassed him by showing that he gave charity in public. This teaches us a great yesod about charity. It's not so much what you give, but how you give. I just want to say here, in memory of my mother-in-law, that my mother-in-law, who was an extraordinary Bala Tzedakah, but when people came to her house, she didn't first give tzedakah. She would first bring them to the dining room table. She would bring out a tray of tea and some cookies, talk with them for 20 minutes, and only then come around to the tzedakah. Sometimes they were going crazy because they wanted to get out and go to another house. But they all appreciated it. And it's amazing what I heard when she was nifter, when she passed away, how much that was meant to so many people, that she treated them with great dignity when they came to her. Yeah. Anyway, so Dina Miral, the Dina Miral Bas and Bess of Yosef, I believe. Anyway, so 583. The Bay Reb Shila Amri and the Yeshiva of Reb Shila, they would say, This means giving charity to a woman in a concealed place. To come isolate because then you get suspicion. You're going to put suspicion of impropriety on the woman. This refers to one who says uncut meat from which the halachically forbidden portions have not yet been removed, to his wife on Erev Shabbos. Now, this reminds me when Rav Pam Zechreinu Lebracha used to give us a shiur on Shalom Bayis. He used to say, if you have a shiloh on the chicken and you wait till Friday to ask the question, don't, whether it's kosher or not, don't be surprised if your wife throws the chicken at you. In other words, timing is everything. Says the Gemara, Rava Meshager, but Rava would send uncut meat to his wife. Obviously, that can't be an undesirable practice. And for the Gemara, Shani Bas Rav Chisda, the daughter of Rav Chisda, Rava's wife was one of the famous daughters of Rav Chisda. But to come the Gavin to be Kia, because she was an expert, because Rava was certain that she was an expert in these matters, and would notice immediately that this meat was not prepared for consumption, and he wasn't worried about that she would use it and whatever. By the way, the daughters of Rav Chisda, my father specifically will know, the daughters, Giselle Horowitz, right, was a Kruger girl. The famous Kruger girls, the famous family Kruger, they all married, every girl married a great friend, Eibel the Rav. One married a Moshe Horowitz, the Unstoffer Rav. One married the Strasburger Rav. One married Rav Biddisfeld. One married somewhere Rabbi Kiva Ehrenfeld, or whatever. Right. Every one of them famously married another Eibel the Rav, another Rav that was connected to the Holy Chassam Sofer and the Be'er Shmuel. Same thing with Rav Chisda. At the very least, one daughter married Rava, another daughter married Rav Zera, right? Famously, the daughters of Rav Chisda are found throughout Shas. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan kimoti lahai kra bechi. When Rabbi Yochanan came to this pasuk, he would cry, V'hoya kisitzena oisei rois rabbis v'tzoris. And it should be that many evils and distresses came upon him. Okay, this is the pasuk in the Chagigah. Eved sherabai mematzam loy rois v'tzoris. A slave whose master brings upon him evil and distresses. Takana yeshloi, does he have any remedy? My rois v'tzoris, Amarav, rois shenasi tzoris zu, evils which compound one to the other. They make things worse. Kigoyim ziburi of akarebo, like the bites of a wasp and a scorpion. The medicine to deal with a wasp bite is no good with regard to a scorpion bite. B'shmuel Amar, this is one who makes money available to a poor person only when he's finally in a pressing need, not before. Amarava, Haidu Da'amri Inchi, Zuza Da'alyo Loishchicha. A zuz is not available for purchasing produce, the silo shchiach, but for food to hang in a basket for people to take, that can be found. Instead of helping people get into business and being self-sufficient, you wait until they're destitute to start helping them out. That's not the right way to do it. And that's what the Rambam writes on the levels of charity, that the highest level of charity is actually not charity, it's putting people on their own 2 feet, making them self-reliant. Right. Says the pasuk, that my anger will flare against him on that day. And I will forsake them and I will conceal my face from them. Again, it's a pasuk in the Chagigah. Amar Rabardula Bataboyomi Amar Rab, Kol She'enai Behest upon him. Anybody who's not subject to this concealing of the face, Eina Mehem are not one of the children, one of Bnei Yisrael. Kol She'ena B'hoya Le'echol. Anybody who's not subject to the punishment, and he will be for consumption, that people will take all their stuff, will rob them, etc. We're now on Hey Amid Beis, 5b1. Eina Mehem is not one of Bnei Yisrael. As Rashi says, Mizera Yisrael. Okay? So Amar Rabbana l'Rabba, Mar lo yisast upon him Isa v'loy b'hoyev le'echol Isa. And they said, Rava, you're not subject to the concealment of the face, nor to you will be for consumption. You're wealthy, and Hashem loves you. Amalahu. So Rava said to him, Mi yadisu kama mishada b'tzina b'shavra malka. Do you know how much money I am forced to send in secret to the palace of Shapar Amelech, the Persian king of the time? In other words, he said, don't count my money for me. Do me a favor. He says like this, Afilu hachi yahabun le'Rabbanan, and now you nonetheless, the Rabbanan set their eyes on Rava. Adahadi shadu debei shava malka. The agents of the king were sent, the Gervayu, and they looted him. Omar Hainu Tanya, Omar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, Kol Mokim Shenostu Chachamim Einayim, any place where the Chachamim set their eyes, Oy Misa, Oy Oni. It's either death or poverty. And that's what's happened to me. I became impoverished. Even though it was a mistake, the bottom line is they were looking askance on him, and that's what happened. Now we come to the famous pasuk. V'anochi aster punai habayoymahu, and I will certainly conceal my face on that day. Amar Rava, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Afal Pisha Yisati punai mehem, even though I will conceal my face from them, b'chaloy madaberboy, I will speak to him through a dream, meaning the Nevi, I will send Nevi'im that they'll hear things from me through a dream. Rabbi Yosef Amar, nonetheless, his hand is stretched over to protect us. Shenema ubitzel yodi kisisicha, with the shadow of my hand I will cover you. This is the famous words of Rav Nachman in Breslov. The song goes, V'anochi aster panai, Bayoimahu, Bayoimahu, Bayoimahu. But the Rebbe says, Afilu b'astara, Afilu b'astara, even in the dark, in the dark of the dark. Vadai gam sham nimsa Hashem yisbarach. The Vadai, even there you find Hashem, blessed is his name. Right? And then that's what the Heiliger Rebbe of Nachman said. That I feel when it says, even though he says, I will hide my face on that day. Nonetheless, even in the Astar, even in the darkness, you will certainly find Hashem Yisbarach. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya was standing in the Caesar's palace in Rome. A heretic was signaling to Rabbi Yeshua because it was in front of the king. He didn't want to talk. The Jews are a nation whose master has turned his face away from it. Remember, this is the time at the advent of Catholicism. Okay, this is what was going on.
That's what they're saying.
What?
That's what the Catholics saying, that we're no longer the chosen people.
Right. So Rabbi Yeshua signaled in reply, Yadai Netue Aleinu, his hand is yet stretched over us. Amalei Kesel Rabbi Yeshua. The Kesel spoke to Rabbi Yeshua and said, My Achvalei. What did he signal to? He said, the Jews are a nation whose master has turned his face from it. I signal to him that his hand is yet outstretched over us. Amalei. Then they said to the heretic, the king did not speak directly to their character. The Caesar only spoke to Rabbi Yeshua, who he was very close to, but the king had his officials talk to the heretic. My achvayis, what did you signal with your signal? He said, the Jews are a nation whose master has turned his face. Well, my achvayis, and what did he signal you back? He said, Lo yadada, I do not know. Amru, they said, a man who does not understand what is being signaled to him. Hey, Kamer Malka had the chutzpah then to be signaling signals before the king. They took him and they killed him for punishment for disrespecting the king. Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanani was about to pass away. The Rebbe said to him, what's going to become of us from the attacks of the heretics? Said, what do you call you? You knew how to answer them. We don't know how to answer. He said to them, of the Eitzah Mibonim Nisricha Kochmosom. The counsel has been lost from the children, their wisdom has soured. Even Shab the Eitzah Mibonim, since the counsel has been lost from the children, the Jews, Nisricha Kochmosom Shalom Asylum, the wisdom of the nations of the world will sour. Travel on and let us go, and I will proceed alongside you. In other words, that even though they may be going parallel, they may be parallel in their arguments, in their religious arguments, they will never best us in the arguments. Okay? We're going to stop right over here. Okay? 5b2.